Good morning, and thank you for the invitation. I'm not sure if I'm the right guy to do a regulatory speech to you, so just before, I think there's a last presentation and then it's launched. First of all, CMRs, I'm sure everyone has heard of it. Our crop protection guys, we use a lot of acronyms, so who in the audience knows what TLA is? A TLA is a three-letter acronym, right? So we use a lot of those. And so CMRs is just one of those, all right? And I'll go into that. Just acknowledgement needs to be given to quite a lot of colleagues who have worked on this, not just in Villa, but in the industry, particularly effort done by CropLife South Africa, who has been active over the last 3 years in trying to make sense of how we proceed this going forward. So why do, and what are the global drivers in terms of minimizing, restricting, banning crop protection products? I think I've been in the industry for about 25 years now. And I remember the day that I started working on a farm with products like Benlate, Lanate. Those of you who are still around, those early days, 30 years ago, those were really incredible products. And over the years, we've heard of so many products being phased out for various reasons. But I think as recently as about 3-4 years ago, we were embarking as an industry on the relabeling, and I'll talk about GHS as a separate entity. But the CMRs essentially are substances of concern that relates to carcinogenic, mutagenic, and reproductive toxicity. So let's stick to CMRs. So if I talk about those, then you know what that's about. Say that really quickly, and you start getting your tongue twisted, right? The factors that influence it has been around, and I think the crop protection industry spends a lot of time in really selecting products, much the same as a breeder does. You spend so much time selecting chemistry and going through the processes of really ensuring that it has a favorable toxicological environment, it has a favorable environmental profile. And those things, especially around human and the environment, has become very important for us to consider. But there has been a lot of debate over the last decade or more around, should we take a hazard approach, should we take a risk approach, or should we take a precautionary approach? And I think today I'm not here to debate where we are, but I think that has really gotten us to a point where the regulating bodies are really prioritizing human health and environmental safety above all else. So this is not new. Is it going to kill our industry? No, not at all. I think what I want to leave you today is just feeling positive without, obviously, I know you've lost chlorpyrifos, so speaker after me will talk about that. But the reality is, a lot of these, we have alternatives, and there's a really a good future in looking for alternatives. So without going into too much detail, this was sort of the sequence of events, and I just really don't want to go into the detail of what happened, but about around 2021, the whole industry was pretty much changing labels to the new global harmonized system for classification of the hazard class of chemicals in the world. So that was a key driver, 2021. Then around April of 2022, the first notification was given by the registrar that within that CMR list 1A and 1B, he intends to ban active ingredients, co-formulants that falls within those sort of classifications. Obviously, that caused a lot of mayhem because no one really knew what it was, but the industry got together around June, and a CMR working group was created, working very closely with all parties in the industry. They reached out to stakeholders, amongst them Hortgrow, CGA, many of those stakeholders, to determine essential uses. And then finally, by June 2023, I think we had a very solid list of what we're talking about, what products are involved. And around August of last year, the regulator promulgated a new act or additions to the act, still Act 36 of 1947, and some major changes came in there, 4 key elements. But for the sake of this talk, let's focus on the intention to ban the CMR containing compounds in the industry. And again, working very closely with industry, certain protocols were set up, communicating what is essential, how do we proceed with this going forward. And I think today we have a really good clarity on how that is going to look like in the future. So going forward, if you haven't seen this on your crop protection packaging, just go back and really look closely that we have, some of us still crying because we have moved away from the old color band coding of hazard class in South Africa, and it's now called the GHS, the Global Harmonized System, or for labeling and reclassification or classification of hazardous material. This is a global impact, particularly UN-based supporters of the initiative, and it is ongoing, and you still have some countries who are way behind others. But when you look at this and you look at those new GHS pictograms on your right bottom side there, you'll start noticing some of them occurring, especially that little figure with the individual with a star in front of the on his chest. And you can see that, you know, once you start seeing those, you have to look out whether the product from a health point of view is not classified as one of those. So this led to a exercise by industry, and we used mainly the resource, which is the European Chemical Association's resource, or ECHA, to determine which of the active ingredients we are dealing with specifically. So when we talk about substances of concern, particularly CMRs, notwithstanding this law that was promulgated last year in August, there will be exceptional circumstances where the regulator can still support or re-register such a substance if certain scenarios exist. And those are really under the three areas. And I'll tell you, the first one is obviously when the risk to humans and the environment is negligible, even under worst case use scenarios. That would be a typical scenario where the registrar or the regulator may still approve such a substance. Second one is in the case where a substance is really vital in supporting, let's say, for instance, a human health or a serious situation. A good example of that could be malaria. You know that in many countries there are still use of DDT on a selected basis, just because that's just the way it works, and it still remains one of those products that really support malaria mosquito control, but very limited. And then the last one is a situation where the effect of banning such a product may lead to a much worse scenario. And I cannot give you examples of that. I would always have thought glyphosate would be one of those products because so many industries are really reliant on a glyphosate. But I think we will have to see how that plays out. But these are the scenarios under which a product can still be supported or derogated to some extent with the registrar. So how can we essentially, just to summarize that, three scenarios then exist. Scenario one would be you do nothing, you do no risk assessment. It means that that product will be dead. By the end of May of 2025, all of that product will have to be phased out throughout the value chain, including on farms. It will no longer be allowed after 31st of May 2025. So there's an extension period for those products to help industry phase out these products. And if you do have these products on your farm, really take some time, talk to your crop advisor, your chemical rep, talk to your supplier, talk to the registration holder to make sure that those products are no longer on your farm by that date. Scenario two is if you intend to do a risk assessment for a specific use of a CMR compound, it will happen only after you've done the risk assessment and then submit an application for derogation, vergunning, of that specific product. And scenario three deals really with substances of concern which are co-formulants. In other words, your typical crop protection compounds does not only consist of the active ingredient, there are co-formulants in there, and some of those could be listed as CMR entities, and they have to be changed, phased out, but you had to have, by the way, sorry, not May 25. In this case, you had to have indicated that you will be doing that submission over the next year. So these are the three scenarios that industry are looking at. Like I said, what is the derogation? It's an exception from the law. It's a vergunning that you can apply for, but you can only do so if there are no alternative products available, and you will have to argue that case. Only specific claims will be considered. In other words, using one example, glufosinate, non-selective herbicide, if you go for a specific derogation, it will be for that specific use, that orchard, that's the only area where it will be allowed. There will be a risk assessment conducted by a professional certified toxicologist. Those guys are expensive, let me tell you that. And so as an industry, we are working very closely, and there's a huge waiting in terms of going through the risk assessments for the industry at the moment. It will be sent after that out for public comment, which is a part that we haven't done in the past before. So it's going to be interesting to see how the public react to the risk assessments. And it will only be, submission will only be considered for derogation if you have done those risk assessments. And very specific, again, very specific uses, not the whole label. You can't go there and say, well, the whole label. No, you've got to do derogation for each and every specific use. So which active ingredients are involved? All of this is available, and by the way, CropLife is a great resource if you want to have a look at those. But essentially, that list was publicized. These are the active ingredients. It doesn't necessarily include the co-formulants, but there were some initial discrepancies, particularly pertaining to products that were there and not there, supposed to be there, but I think finally we have that list down to all the active ingredients that will be affected. Maybe better to talk to you as a palm and stone fruit industry. So if we look at the fungicides, herbicides, and insecticides, if you look at this, clearly you can see you should not be that scared, right? The reality is, if you look at and under fungicides in yellow, those are registered active ingredients for the palm and stone fruit industry. 3 of those, or 2 of those, are actually triazoles. There are new generation triazoles also in the market. Carbendazim, which is a metabolite essentially of Benamil, and Mangoseb, which is a big one. And I'll come back to a few statements on what the industry is going to do with regard to that. Herbicides, obviously the rest on the list is not necessarily available in palm and stone fruit. Herbicide, the big one that I want to show out there is glufosinate ammonium. That is a big herbicide, a non-selective herbicide that are frequently used in orchards. And I think that's, again, I'll tell you again what the industry is doing there. Some of the other products that was quite interesting, that's 1-sulfonylurea, which is really used in maize. But if you look at the only fopendin, that's quizalofop. That is also being investigated, but I guess I'll come back to that. And topromazone, which is really a very new trichotone chemistry that's being used mainly in corn, maize. And then on the insecticides, finally EDB, ethylene dibromide, which is a fumigant used largely for nematode control. But if you look at thiacloprid, that's a key one that's been around for many years. That will disappear. If you look at those actives, you'll recognize that many of them have already for many years had defaulted MRLs. So from that perspective, I think a lot of farms have learned to use alternatives already over a long period. So where to from here? I really loved the talk that was given by Dr. Roma Gwyn, going back into the IPM. For those of you around in 1997, when Europe GAP first started being implemented on farms, this was the presentation that was presented by Food Plus at the time, talking about good agricultural practices, which we really understood as integrated crop management, and out of integrated crop management was IPM. And IPM really was about prevention through observation and intervention, and whether that be biologicals, cultural, physical, or chemistry. That was the view. And I still believe that as we move forward, this is going to be a key component of how we manage general plant health in the industry again. So I also can't go on and saying, look, all chemicals are hazardous, sure. But we need to be able to recognize that if you use a product that is registered and you use it according to that label recommendation and according to what protective clothing you must wear, then most of the harm can be mitigated. And that is the industry stance. And in spite of all the anti-pesticide lobby, that we do have a very strong contribution to be, that needs to be made and sustained. By the way, the crop protection industry last year was valued at about $68.3 billion, and is expected to grow by 2032 to approximately $98 billion US dollars. Biologicals, yes, $10 billion. It's half of that is made up of biostimulants, gel-based products, amino acids, Vilvix, Humix, bioinoculants, and that the control part of biopesticides, the control division, is growing at about 10% compounded annually. It will be a very important segment, but do not forget that the crop protection industry has been around and chemical will be around for quite a while. And so expect a lot of innovation to come out of the crop protection industry. So again, how to mitigate the impact going forward? Companies can either derogate or you can reclassify if you have enough data to support the reclassification away from the CMRs. We've talked about using alternatives that are currently registered, of which there are quite a few, and I'll show you some examples. There will be formulation change considered if you have a co-formulant that is a CMR. And then obviously let's develop new activities. And there's a pipeline, a rich pipeline from many of the research-based companies out there that I think you should be able to look at and really see that they will make a huge contribution in the future as well. So the derogation groups that were formed in terms of companies supporting those with risk analysis going forward and then applying for derogation are these active ingredients, fungicides, the gray, herbicides, the purple, and the insecticides on the orange. Whether, again, it's not a guarantee that the companies will be successful. You have to go through the risk analysis and thereafter the derogation period. What is good is that there's likely to be an extension on these. If we look at products that reclassification are currently being evaluated or considered, Mancozeb, a big one, 3 companies who has been actively supporting on that forum, UPL, Villa, South Africa, Corteva, we're working with the citrus industry. But I think ultimately the reclassification, we'll see how successful the source providers of that is. Then finally, propiconazole, epoxiconazole, cyproconazole, dimethomorph, and quizalofop. The intention has been communicated that these companies will try to have it reclassified, which means that it will be available for much longer. Then obviously formulation change of compounds, just consider that if the inert that is a substance of concern makes up less than 10%, you can purely submit that registration with changing of that inert as long as it represents less than 10%. If it is more than 10% of your formulation, you really have to redo all of the development. And that's essentially what the formulation chain will entail. And again, looking at the alternatives that is available to the industry, quite a rich number of active ingredients. So again, I would invite you to, as a farmer, sit down with your crop advisor, your crop protection specialist, and talk through these actives and how you can, again, reposition them. The challenge becomes resistance management and managing MRLs. And I think those are really an integrated approach about how you can take that forward. And I'm almost finished. We've talked about the new AIs, exploring new AIs that may be coming through. Developing AIs not yet registered in South Africa. Remember, if I said to you that the global crop protection market is around 68 billion US dollars, South Africa makes 1% of that. So big companies are not necessarily intending to develop these AIs. And I think as stakeholders from the industry, this is where we can work together and getting those AIs into the industry. not going to talk much about biologicals. I think it was adequately covered. I think it is a huge part of the future. And then I leave you with this last item. I think there's some presentations that we need to look at: AgTech services, precision agriculture, area-wide monitoring, weather stations. I still struggle to see many farms not having weather stations. Application technology improvements, and I think I will leave it there because I think there will be more talk on application equipments a bit later. I thank you.